J.D. Vance killed the Pope. Pope Francis died, and people are already accusing J.D. Vance of killing the Pope. Pope Francis met J.D. Vance on Easter Sunday and showered him with gifts.
There was another theory around this. They're saying it's because he just put out a statement condemning the situation in Gaza.
Could it be the death of Pope Francis signals a 1,000-year prophecy is coming true and the end of times is near? Well,
it was a morning that stunned the world. On April 21st, 2025, Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, the reformer, the Pope of the people, was declared dead at just 88 years old. Official statements came fast. Natural causes, they said. A cerebral stroke, compounded by heart failure. But the speed and secrecy of it all left a thick cloud of unease hanging over the Vatican and far beyond. Questions exploded across social media. Whispers filled the marble halls of Rome. Was it really just fate that ended the reign of one of the most controversial leaders in modern Catholic history? Or was something far darker unfolding behind those sacred walls? What you're about to hear goes way beyond the official story. And once you see the hidden patterns, you might never look at the church the same way again. But this is just the beginning. The Vatican wasted no time crafting the official story. Within hours of Pope Francis's passing, a carefully worded statement was released to the world. The Holy Father passed peacefully in his private residence at Domus Sanctae Marthae, following complications from a cerebral stroke and heart failure. It sounded calm, controlled, almost too polished. But there was one detail that immediately set off alarms among those paying attention. No autopsy would be performed. None. Despite the sudden nature of his death, the Vatican invoked ancient tradition, insisting that popes are laid to rest without post-mortem examination. For some, this was acceptable. For others, it was a glaring red flag waving in plain sight. After all, with so many political battles swirling within the church and powerful enemies lurking in the shadows, how could the world be so sure about what really happened? The questions didn't stop there. They were only getting louder, and what surfaced next would send shockwaves through the Catholic world. In the months leading up to his sudden death, Pope Francis' health had become an open secret. But what few realized was just how bad things had gotten behind the scenes. In February 2025, he was rushed to the hospital with what Vatican spokespeople downplayed as a mild respiratory infection. But insiders whispered a much graver reality: double pneumonia and severe complications that left him gasping for air. Publicly, he reappeared in March looking frail, smiling for the cameras. But if you looked closely, the image was chilling. His steps were slower. His voice, once booming and full of fire, had become thin and strained. Easter Sunday, just days before his death, offered one final glimpse of a pope who was visibly struggling to stand, propped up by aides, delivering blessings with a trembling hand. And yet, Vatican officials insisted everything was business as usual. No emergency protocols, no succession discussions, no preparation for the unthinkable. It was almost as if they were desperately trying to pretend he wasn't slipping away right before the world's eyes. But the truth was leaking out, and what some Vatican insiders claimed was happening behind closed doors was even more disturbing. Almost immediately after the announcement of Pope Francis's death, the Vatican moved with lightning speed, faster than anyone expected, to plan his funeral. But it wasn't just the speed that raised eyebrows. It was the details. Traditionally, a pope's body lies in state for at least 9 days, allowing the faithful to mourn and the world's leaders to pay their respects. But for Pope Francis, only 3 days were officially scheduled. And instead of being buried alongside his predecessors in the crypts of St. Peter's Basilica, the holiest ground in Vatican City, he was taken to the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore. A stunning, almost unheard-of deviation from centuries of papal tradition. At first, the Vatican spun it as a tribute to Francis's humility, since he often prayed at that basilica. But others weren't so sure. Why break centuries of sacred tradition now, when tensions in the church were already boiling under the surface? Why rush the funeral proceedings with so little explanation? Some insiders claimed the answer was simple. The faster they buried Francis, the fewer questions the public could ask. It was a strategy that had worked before in darker chapters of Vatican history, and it seemed history might be repeating itself. But it gets even crazier. The final group allowed to view Francis's body wasn't composed of cardinals or world leaders. It was marginalized groups, the homeless, migrants, outcasts. A fitting tribute to his life's work, yes, but also a calculated distraction from the political chaos already brewing behind closed doors. And while the world mourned on the surface, deep inside the Vatican, ancient power struggles were already erupting. Battles that some believe could explain why Francis's reign ended so abruptly. As the funeral bells echoed across Rome, the world's most powerful figures began to descend on the Vatican. Presidents, monarchs, celebrities, they all came, or at least that's what the cameras showed. But behind the photo ops and somber faces, something much stranger was happening. Whispers spread quickly about unusual, off-the-record meetings between some of the biggest names in global politics. Prince William, stepping in for King Charles, was spotted in a quiet corner of St. Peter's Square, exchanging sharp words with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Former US President Donald Trump arrived unexpectedly, claiming to pay his respects. But observers noted he spent more time in private discussions with key Vatican officials than at any of the public services. It wasn't just random. Some believe the funeral had become a stage for secret negotiations, power brokering, and the future shaping of not just the Catholic Church, but global alliances themselves. Deals were whispered, alliances were rumored, and the tension was so thick you could almost feel it in the air. And even crazier, some attendees, major political figures, left before the funeral even concluded, fueling theories that their true purpose for being in Rome had nothing to do with mourning Pope Francis, and everything to do with what would come next. But if you thought the political games were shocking, wait until you see what was happening inside the Vatican itself, because the real war for power was just beginning. In the days following Pope Francis' funeral, the official story began to crack. And what leaked out next sent shockwaves through even the most faithful circles. First came the whispers that his death had been convenient. Too convenient for certain powerful factions within the church who had opposed his progressive reforms for over a decade. Francis had dared to open the doors of the Vatican wider than ever before, embracing migrants, confronting financial corruption, and even hinting at blessings for same-gender unions. To the world, he was a beacon of hope. But inside the ancient corridors of the Vatican, enemies were gathering. Enemies who saw his reforms as nothing less than a betrayal of centuries-old power structures. Rumors spread that just days before his death, Francis had drafted secret documents intended to expose deep financial scandals within the Vatican Bank. Documents that some sources claim have now mysteriously disappeared. Others pointed to the sudden tightening of security around high-ranking cardinals and the mysterious absence of key members of the Curia from his funeral rites. A sign, some believe, that not everyone was mourning. And the most chilling theory of all, that Francis' final illness had been helped along, not in a dramatic way, but slowly, silently, through neglect, isolation, and quiet pressure, until his weakened body simply gave out. No fingerprints, no smoking gun. Just a pope left vulnerable with no allies strong enough to protect him in his final days.